Car crash cases, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts. The attorneys with Josh Wright from the law firm of Hollis, Wright, and host David Lamb.
Good evening and welcome into the attorneys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for the next half hour. Trust me, we've got an exceptional guest with a really important, crucial conversation and area of expertise. That's coming up. We're going to introduce them in just a moment. But first, a couple of reminders, kind of the ground rules of our show. We love whenever you interact with us. Several ways to do so. Attorneys from Hollis Wright are standing by live all throughout the program tonight. Yes, really attorneys from Hollis Wright. That's a free, confidential, all-fair conversation. Just pick up the phone and give them a call. Also, you can text us that number if you would like to text the show, the number 205-670-1949, or you can call us at 1-844-LAW-TALK, 844-529-8255. Plenty of ways for you to join our conversation. Now, leading our conversation tonight, he's the managing partner of Hollis Wright, Josh Wright. Good to see you, sir.
You too. Hope you had a great week.
I did indeed. Thank you.
You know, David, we do shows a lot related to family law related issues because there are so many. It's a broad topic, and there's so many issues. We're going to zero in on a certain part of family law tonight related to abuse and neglect. We're going to dabble into some other things. But Maria Fortune is with us tonight, and she's an expert in this area. And it's a good shining example of circumstances where our firm doesn't do this type of work. We love to bring the experts on that know about this because I think this is candidly a topic, for better or for worse, that a lot of the viewing public can gather some useful information on. And if you're going through one of these circumstances, if you know somebody that's been neglected or abused, or you know of it going on right now, what you can do to help that person, that child. In addition, if you are on the abusing side, what the potential penalties and ramifications are. So we're going to talk just a little bit about that tonight. So first of all, welcome aboard.
Welcome. Thank you for having me on the show today.
Well, we're excited to have you on the show, and I know this is an area in kind of the pre-production side of this. I meet with someone in my office who told me about your expertise, and this is a calling.
Yes.
I mean, there are certain areas of the law that may not be callings. This really is a calling. This is near and dear to your heart and something that you focus on. How did you get into this area of family law? Because it's a unique area.
Well, I initially started working for the Department of Human Resources in their Child and Welfare Unit when I initially started practicing law. And then after doing that for several years, I started to come out on my own and represent the parents and the children who have cases with abuse and neglect. And so that's how I started, and I've gathered an expertise in that area, and I enjoy it. It's a lot of times, a lot of people don't talk about these type of cases. It's more the divorce and the custody cases that are focused on. And so I thought we would focus on dependency and neglect tonight.
All right, so I know when we have talked about these topics before, one of the questions we get oftentimes is, look, if I'm being investigated for abuse and neglect, do I lose my child instantaneously? How does the process work? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because it probably requires a lawyer to get involved early.
It does, and what I tell a lot of people is that the Department of Human Resources and their child welfare program, their sole goal is to ensure the safety of the children. And so if there's an allegation of abuse or neglect, DHR is going to come out and conduct an investigation. And while they're conducting their investigation, they're going to ensure the safety of the child. And so there's three different options that usually the department will pursue while they're conducting their investigation. The first one is that they may allow the child to stay in the home, but they may put some services in place once they can identify what the abuse or neglect is and allow that child to stay in the home and provide those services. If it's a little bit more severe, what they may do, if it hasn't made it to the court yet, they may put a safety plan in place. And what the parents will agree with the department is that the child will go and reside with a family member or a friend while they conduct their investigation. And if everything is okay, then they'll return that child back home. If not, then sometimes that case escalates to where the court is involved. involved. And if the court has to get involved and to assure the safety, they'll place that child in foster care while they're conducting their investigation. But the Department of Human Resources, their goal is to use the least restrictive means in order to protect that child. And so there are those 3 different options that the department does have to use if there is an allegation of abuse or neglect in your home.
Now, you have used several times, and I was listening, abuse and neglect. These cases don't always arise with physical abuse, do they?
No. Abuse can be verbal abuse. It could be, it can result in physical, sexual. It could be neglect as far as parents on drugs, alcohol. It could be educational neglect. So it's a wide range of issues that can cause the department to get involved. It could be mental health issues where parents aren't stabilized on their medication, and they're putting the children at risk. There could be other family members that are abusing the children in different forms that require the department to get involved.
What do you recommend? Because I know you get this question. I have to believe you get this question. Someone says, look, I think that there may be some form of abuse or neglect going on with this child on my street, or that I know that is maybe even a family member. What do you recommend to those people? Like, what options do they have? I know, for example, teachers, law enforcement officers, medical professionals, they have certain responsibilities to report. But what do you tell a typical individual who thinks, hey, look, I think something may be going on here? How do you normally advise that person?
So if they feel like there's some type of abuse or neglect going on in a home with a family member or somebody on their block, I recommend that they call the Department of Human Resources, and they have a hotline. And here in Jefferson County, I know the number is 205-423-4500. And you can make an anonymous report, and they will take your information down, and then the department, depending on the level of the abuse or neglect, they have certain time periods that they have to go out and make contact with that child and to gather information to find out if it's a viable concern or issue.
Now, there are, I'm sure, a lot of parents that come to you and say, hey, look, DHR is investigating me right now. I didn't do anything wrong. They should not even be in my life. Do those parents have rights? Are there certain rights where it's not just a guaranteed, this child's definitely going into foster care because you're being investigated? I mean, the parent has some rights, do they not? They
do have rights. And so when the department, because a lot of times the department will make contact with the child out at school where the parent won't even have a clue that DHR is making contact. But what I tell my clients, or people who may get a call from DHR and say, we're investigating you, I tell them to retain an attorney, because this is a process that a lot of people don't know how to navigate through. And you have a right to have an attorney present with you while they're asking you questions and while you're being investigated, to make sure that you're not giving them any information that may be detrimental to you or to your child. And so you do have a right to have an attorney present during that process. If your case does make it to the court, and you can retain an attorney, but if you are unable to afford an attorney once the case gets into court, the court will appoint you an attorney. It's usually either a contract attorney, or it could be an appointed attorney, where there's a lot of attorneys here in Jefferson County that they have private practices, but they also take appointed cases on the side to represent you in those type of cases. And they will represent you from the initial phase up until the dispositional, or till hopefully you don't get to the phase where your parental rights are terminated, but it can go that long.
I know we're getting ready to go to break, David. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit about the court's involvement in this process and what role the court plays. One of the important points I think that was made is you need to get a lawyer involved. And that's super important when you're getting involved with the court, and the court's involved in evaluating and trying to make some decisions on what's in the best interest of the child. So let's talk about that when we come back.
We'll do that. We'll pick up right there whenever we come back. A reminder as we head to break, if you are on social media, surely wish you would check out Hollis Wright. Just search the term Hollis Wright. You'll find them on Instagram, Twitter, as well as Facebook. A great educational, informational, legal resource there. Stay tuned. More of The Attorneys coming right up.
I'm Josh Wright with the law firm of Hollis Wright, a personal injury law firm. Thank you for watching The Attorneys. Now, we hope you, a friend, or a loved one never needs legal counsel for a case. But if you do, the goal of the show is simple: provide answers and legal counsel when you need it the most. Your call to the show is free, so if you have questions specific to the show or related to other accident or injury-related topics, you can call, email, or text us. Or you can also follow us on Facebook or Twitter, or simply contact us by going to hollis-wright.com and click on the Contact Us link. We know your time is valuable, so thank you for spending it with us watching The Attorneys.
Welcome back into The Attorneys. Get right back to our conversation in just a quick moment, but a couple of reminders. We'd love to have you text us the number to write down. Make note of this one. If you want to text this show, 205-670-1949, and the Law Talk number is 844-LAW-TALK or 844-529-8255. Josh?
All right, so when these start, generally DHR may be doing an investigation. When does a judge get involved generally in these investigations and start to reach some conclusions and decisions that can impact you?
So if the case, if they find out there is abuse or neglect and that DHR needs longer than the 90 days on a safety plan that they normally place a child in, they will have to file a petition with the court, and that's when the court gets involved. And the judge at that time will assess the case with the social workers and determine what services need to be put in place. And so if there's allegations of, drugs, then they're going to want them to do some type of substance abuse classes. They may want them to drug test on a regular basis. They're going to always want to make sure a parent has housing and employment. They're always, if there's an issue with mental health, they're going to want to make sure that they're stabilized on their medication and they're getting their mental health treatment. And so the judge monitors that on a regular basis. So there's usually, 3 or 4 review periods during a period of time where the judge is making a determination to see if the parents are doing what they need to do in order to reunify with their families.
And what's this issue of dependency? How does that work into all this?
So dependency is basically the child is dependent because they don't either have a parent to take care of them, or it's a variety of different, the statute gives a variety of different reasons which makes a child dependent. So it could be that the child is without housing, the child is without somebody to care for them, there's educational neglect, physical neglect, and that's where the word dependency comes in. Right. And the court has to find a finding of dependency in order to get jurisdiction over that case, to order the parents to do certain things in the case, and to make a determination where custody will eventually lie for that child long term.
And a question here on that matter related there says, do I have a right to counsel in dependency proceedings?
And that's what I just briefly talked about earlier. Yes, you definitely have a right to counsel. And a lot of times there are parents that, they may not have the best jobs, and so the court will appoint them an attorney to make sure that they're represented. And so you will have an attorney from the first time that it hits the court system, you will get an attorney on that day, and until the case is resolved with the courts. And it can be resolved in a variety of different ways. It can be resolved where the child returns back to the parents, and that's what we always hope, that we reunite the child with the parent. But if the parents don't get it together, the child could stay with a family member and the case closes out, and they'll have an attorney during that process. Or if it leads to termination of parental rights, they will have a right to an attorney.
Where does foster care come into this? Because I hear a lot about foster care. Where does foster care come in? At some level or at some point, does a parent lose parental rights if they're not able to get it together? I mean, how does that all work?
So foster care comes in, usually the court always wants to place a child with a family member if the parents can't take care of the child. But we have to have a viable relative resource to take the child. So if there's not any family members that are able to take this child, that's when foster care comes into place, and they place the child in foster care. And the parents have a certain period of time that they need to get everything together. So the court wants the child to have permanency within 12 months of the child going into foster care. And if they can't establish permanency within that period of time by the parents doing everything that the court has instructed them to do, and if the child is with a family member, then that child the custody will the case will close out with custody with that family member. If the child is in foster care, unfortunately, in 12 months, then the Department of Human Resources will actually file a petition for termination of parental rights, and that child will be, parents' rights will be terminated, and that child will be put up for adoption.
And so once the child gets to that level and they're adopted, what happens if the parent has lost parental rights, which I mean, I've heard it happens.
Yes.
Does the parent have the ability later to get visitation to all those things, or how does that even work?
Unfortunately, when a parent's rights are terminated, they lose all rights to their child. So even the aunt, the uncle, grandparents, that right, that relationship is completely terminated. And so that parent can't come back and file a petition for custody for that child because that child is no longer theirs anymore.
So it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, foster care is a gap filler for the parents to try and get it together. If they can't get it together, there are options for the child to make sure the child gets to a more stable environment permanently.
That is correct.
Okay.
The court is big on permanency. We don't like these kids in limbo, going back and forth, not knowing where they're going to be at. And so if they're in foster care and the parents don't do within 12 months, then that child is going to have permanency in another home.
Go ahead.
A question we've got here, if I've lost my custody of my child or children due to substance abuse, are there any rehabilitative, easy for me to say, courts that will help me with my addition? Is there help for folks in that position?
There is, and I do a lot of practice in Jefferson County, and so I know that they have a wellness court there, and that's ran by Judge Summers, and that basically addresses substance abuse issues. And so what they'll do is they'll normally do an assessment on that parent and to determine what type of treatment they may need, because sometimes we have parents that only use marijuana, but then we have parents that are addicted to cocaine and heroin and have everything in their system when their child is born, or if they come into care. And so they'll determine what kind of track they need to be on. And the wellness court has 2 different tracks. So there's an 18-month program that they work with them to work towards getting their kids back, and there's a 6 to 9 month program. And what typically happens is that they'll be given a case manager as well as they'll have their social worker from the department that will work hand on hand with them to make sure that they're pretty much making a lifestyle change to help rehabilitate them and place them back with their children. And the judge, they see the judge more frequently, so they would see the judge maybe every week or every other week versus once every 3 months, which then that kind of helps the court get to know who that person is and helps them work towards reuniting them with their kids. And what I can say is that in the wellness court in Jefferson County, that it has a very high success rate. The majority of the people that go through the wellness court end up with their kids back in their care, and you don't see them back in the system.
How do you handle, because I know this has to happen the majority of the time, they're siblings.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of people have multiple kids, right? And so if they're siblings, how is that managed? Does the court try and keep them together? How does that work?
Usually the goal always is, and that's where the child has a guardian ad litem that comes into play, but the goal is always for a sibling group to stay together. It's already hard for kids that they lose their parents, then they lose their sibling group. And so the court always makes sure that they can try to keep the sibling group together unless there's some allegations of sex abuse against the siblings amongst each other, then they have to separate them for their best interest. But the court will always try to err on the side of caution and put the kids together.
How long have you been doing this?
14 years. So.
I mean, when I talk about a calling, like just the amount of cases that you see and the emotion, just the raw emotion. I know I did many years ago, I was a big brother, and I just remember, I still to this day remember the emotion of the family for this child to be able to go do some of the things that he had never been able to do before. And I recognized, that there's just so much raw emotion in this with children and parents and neglect and abuse. And it really does take someone that's got a strong personality to be able to do it. So I'm really impressed with you, because this is not an easy area of the law.
No, it's not. I go home every night and I go to sleep with something that I'm dealing with these children.
We're going to talk about some case examples when we get back. I want to just hear kind of what she's seeing, and let's work our way through that.
That sounds good. Let's take our final break of the evening. As we do so, a reminder, this is a great opportunity to give the lawyers who are standing by a call. Give them a call. Attorneys from Hollis, Wright, actual attorneys, free, confidential, and off air. Take advantage of that, and then come on back. We'll be back at the final segment of the attorneys coming right up.
I'm attorney Carter Clay with Hollis Wright Law Firm. If you've ever been involved in a civil lawsuit or been a witness to an accident, then you may have been asked to give deposition testimony. In this week's Legal 411, we are answering the question, what is a deposition and why am I being asked to give one? Depositions involve the process of a person giving under oath testimony that is outside of court. The person giving deposition testimony is referred to as the deponent. Depositions are taken in the presence of a court reporter, and the court reporter records the testimony. After the deposition, the attorneys for the parties received a typed transcript that contains all the questions that were asked by the attorneys as well as the answers given by the deponent. The purpose of taking depositions is to ensure that the attorneys for the parties have a full and complete understanding of the events giving rise to the lawsuit, as well as an understanding of the testimony that they can expect to hear from witnesses at trial. Another reason an attorney might want to get deposition testimony is that it allows the attorneys to better prepare for trial and to develop a strategy for presenting the case to a judge or a jury. At trial, the deposition testimony can be used in several ways. First, if a witness on the stand deviates from the deposition testimony, an attorney can use the deposition to impeach the witness. Also, if a witness forgets certain facts or events, the deposition can be used to refresh the witness's recollection. Finally, in some instances when a witness simply cannot attend trial, the trial judge has the authority to allow the deposition testimony to be read to the jury. If you are a party to a lawsuit and are requested to give deposition testimony, your attorney will likely spend a significant amount of time preparing you for the deposition process to put you at ease and make you feel comfortable. Please remember, your call, email, or text to the attorneys is free. All of us at Hollis Wright want to help answer your questions on real issues you face. Remember, a competent lawyer will respond to every question you send in. That's our pledge and promise to you. Thanks for watching The Attorneys on WVTM 13.
Welcome back into The Attorneys, our final segment. If you want to join our conversation, just a few minutes remaining to do so. That reminder, if you want to text us, 205-670-1949, or give us a call, 844-LAW-TALK. That's 844-529-8255. Josh?
What do you see most often in your practice? I'm not looking for you to divulge confidential information, but what snags families the most? I mean, is it drug and alcohol abuse? Is it just neglect? Is it lack of socioeconomic, financial ability to care for a child? Or is it just kind of all of the above?
It's all of the above, but the majority of the cases are substance abuse. The underlying issue is substance abuse that then leads to, the socioeconomic issues as far as them not having the proper employment to care for their kids, and then it results into abuse, where if, they're drinking, they're allowing other people to abuse their kids, or they're abusing their kids when they get drunk, or they're using substances. So, but underlying issue a lot of times is a substance abuse issue. And
it sounds like Jefferson County has got courts that manage that.
Yes, they do. So they not only have the wellness court there in family court, but they have the drug court in Jefferson County and criminal court, as well as in Birmingham Municipal. They also have a drug court program. And a lot of times we see the same clientele that are in the drug court and criminal court that are also working towards trying to get custody of their kids back. So it's what I tell people is if we can help them in family court, then that makes a lifestyle change for them. So then they're not picking up the criminal charges. They're not back in family court. I mean, so family court is there to provide services, vocational, financial, everything for them.
A question here, if DHR has my child in foster care, places him there, am I required to pay child support to the Department of Human Resources for the child?
Yes, you are. So unfortunately, a lot of parents don't like to hear that, but the department at times will file a separate case, a petition for support, and ask that the parents pay child support to support them while they're in foster care, and they'll calculate child support according to the Alabama child support guidelines. A lot of parents, and the reason why they do that is because it's coming out of, people who pay taxes, pockets as far as making payments, but also the court wants to be able to see that these parents can also financially provide for their kids. So if they're able to support them while they're in foster care, the court knows that they're going to be able to support them when they're in their own custody.
What does it take? Like, is there a standard that's applied for a loss of parental rights where you completely lose that right? How is that assessed?
So a lot of times what the court will do is when that dependency case is open, there's services in place that you have to do within that period of time. So if they don't do the services and they don't see a change in those parents, that's when that petition for termination of parental rights is going to be filed, and the court is going to determine whether or not the child is dependent still at the time that they file the TPR. Because a lot of times parents will rehabilitate themselves and then they can't prove the termination of parental rights. But if they're in the same situation 12 months later, where they're still abusing drugs and alcohol, they don't have their housing, they don't have their employment, there's a likelihood that the court's going to terminate their parental rights and provide that permanency for the child.
And one other issue that I know we get questions about is in circumstances where somebody wants to voluntarily terminate their parental rights. What's the best approach, and how do you, I know you've seen that in your practice before, I mean, is it through the family court that they do that to try and get their child? I mean, because I know circumstances where I've seen firsthand where people aren't doing this because they've got substance abuse problems. They just can't care for a child, and they want better for the child. Right. What do they normally need to do?
So, I mean, I think it would initially start at if, you know, they have a case, then they relinquish to the Department of Human Resources. And then at that time, that child will be placed in foster care. And if there isn't a family member or relative that can take the child, then the court, they will file a termination of parental rights and place that child up for adoption. And usually a child up until the age of 12 has to consent to the adoption. So if they're smaller, then they're going to most likely be placed for adoption and be adopted.
One last issue. I know we're getting ready for party thoughts. One last issue. When a child reaches age of majority, call it 19, do they have the right to go do what they want to do? Meaning, are they emancipated at that stage?
Yeah, so the court, I mean, the family court has jurisdiction over a child until they're 21 years old if they're in foster care. So there are different services that they can provide for them, but at 19, they're typically considered emancipated and considered an adult.
10-second final thought. If you would, you go first.
I made it short. I made it short.
That if you find yourself in a situation where you're dealing with a dependency or neglect case, it's always best to have an attorney to help assist you and maneuver through that process.
Yeah, and I would just echo that. You know, this is such a great area of the law, and there are lawyers that we need in our communities that are willing to engage in this and learn about this area of the law and be good at what they're doing. You can tell without question she's good. Right. So just really credit this area of the law. It's a neat area of the law that requires legal counsel.
We appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
You're doing a great job.
Great job.
Keep it up. Thank you, and thank you as well. As always, we appreciate you. We'll look for you next time right here on The Attorneys.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.